In this video, Validea's Jack Forehand walks through the ETF Factor Screener, a screening tool that allows you to filter out and find ETFs based on value, momentum, quality, and the low volatility factors, as well as more specific fundamentals in each of those factor categories.
The goal of our ETF screener is to help you filter through a universe of over 500 US equity ETFs and to figure out what you're getting when you buy the ETF. Before I start, I want to point out that there's going to be a variety of terms I'm going to use in here that are specific to ETFs that you may not understand. If you go to our ETF factor report before you view this video, we do a much more detailed walkthrough there where we talk about the definition of each of these terms. You can find that by going to Tools and then ETF Factor Report in our top navigation. So onto the screener. The goal of the ETF screener is, from a factor perspective, to tell you what you get when you buy any specific ETF. And if you were looking for instance, value ETFs, this will allow you to go through and find the ETFs with the most value exposure, or it'll allow you to find ETFs that have the most value exposure for your money if you want to combine fees and value exposure together. It'll also allow you to filter on many of the standard variables that you see on many websites that allow you to filter through ETFs. So let's get started. Starting at the top, our general criteria dropdown allows you to filter based on many of the common things you'll see that you would want to filter ETFs on. The total assets in the fund, the expense ratio, the number of holdings in the fund, the active share, which is defined in our factor report video, the fee that you're paying for that active share, as well as the implied liquidity, which tells you the liquidity of the underlying holdings within the ETF. So to do a simple screen, if I wanted ETF with expense ratios less than 50 basis points, I would select expense ratio from the dropdown. I would select 0.5 in the maximum, and then I would click Add. And you'll see here over to the right, those criteria will fill in. And so you'll see now my criteria is being filtered for all funds with expense ratios less than 50 basis points. And you'll see the bottom results now will refresh based on that. And so our initial sort is based on total assets. So you're seeing here S&P 500 funds, but you can click any of the headings and resort the results based on any of those headings. The second little checkbox here allows you to filter out sector funds. And one of the things that will happen is if you're looking for a general ETF that covers all sectors, when you start to use the criteria of this, you'll see a lot of sector funds will work their ways into the results. So for instance, if you were looking for inexpensive ETFs with the most value exposure, you might see a lot of energy ETFs right now. And so as a way to allow you to filter those out if you don't want to see them, you can check this box right here, and that will filter any sector funds or industry funds from your results. The second section here allows you to filter ETFs based on their style. So our system, as we explained in the factor report video, our system goes through all ETFs and classifies them based on whether they generally buy small, mid, or large cap stocks, and also what their style is, whether it's value, momentum, quality, low volatility, or multi-factor. And so you can use these drop-downs to filter based on any of those styles. The main section of the report is the factor exposure section, and we explain that as well in the ETF report video, but the goal here is to find ETFs that have the most exposure to any individual factor. And we cover value, quality, negative quality, momentum, low volatility, and also a total score that covers multi-factor exposure. So the rankings are from 1 to 99. The ETFs with 99 have the most exposure. So for instance, the cheapest stocks would have the cheapest ETFs would have a 99 value exposure. And you can use these drop-downs to create whatever criteria you want to create. And one of the interesting things about this is you can not only rank based on total value exposure, but if you have a specific ratio you're looking for that you think is better than the others, you can do that as well. So if you wanted to have an ETF that, for instance, has the most exposure to EV to EBITDA, I could put a 90 here. I could select EV to EBITDA from the dropdown, put a 90 in here, and then add the criteria. And now the bottom will refresh with the ETFs that have the most exposure to that EV to EBITDA factor, with any ETFs that have a score above 90 there, and sorted descending by the EV to EBITDA factor. So here you're seeing the ETFs, with the most exposure to that factor. You'll also notice on the right side here where it lists all your criteria, at any point you can click an X for each criteria to delete it, or you can click this clear all criteria, which I'm going to click right now, to clear all the criteria and start over. One of the dropdowns I skipped here underneath the factor exposure is this pre-built search dropdown. And so if you don't want to go into exact detail as to which criteria you want to use, these are some general queries we built on our own, which will allow you to find ETFs with exposure to each of the factors as well as combinations of them. So for instance, if I just wanted the cheapest ETFs with the most exposure to value, I would pick most value exposure here. I would click add, and I'm going to get a list of the cheapest ETFs or the ETFs with the most exposure to a composite of value factors, so across all the different major factors. And then like I showed you before, if you wanted to filter that even further and you were interested in only ETFs or ETFs that have the lowest price to book, you could come in here and put a price to book exposure of 95 and add that to the pre-built criteria, and now you're getting the ETFs with the most exposure to price to book. And you can do the same thing with quality, with negative quality, with momentum, with low volatility, with multi-factor exposure. You can look at the overall exposure, or you can filter down and look at the individual exposures within it. And so that's what the pre-built search does. The one other thing I wanted to point out with the pre-built search is the bottom one here, which is most multi-factor exposure. If I clear my previous criteria, just wait for that to refresh, and then if I go most multi-factor exposure in the pre-built search, this is going to look, our system ranks all ETFs using a combination of all the different exposures. And so what it's looking for here is ETFs with consistently high exposures to all the different factors, whether it's value, quality, negative quality, momentum, low volatility. In the case of negative quality, it's looking for low exposure because negative quality is a negative. But in general, it's looking for consistent and high exposure across all of the factors. And so when I use this pre-built multi-factor exposure search and I refresh the page, I get the ETFs with the most exposure to a variety of these factors. And so if you're not looking to bet on any individual factor, value or quality or anything like that, you can use this to try to find the ETFs that do the best job of getting exposure across all of them. Before we're done, I just wanted to point out one other thing. I'm going to clear my criteria one more time. And if you look at the bottom here, we have this sector weight dropdown. And what this allows you to do is find ETFs that either have a lot or a little exposure to any given sector. So for instance, if I am very negative on energy right now, and I want to find value funds, but I don't want value funds that have more than 10% energy, what I could do is go back here and start by finding funds with the most value exposure like I did before, add that from the pre-built searches, and then what I can do is put energy and put a maximum of 10, and I can add that as well. And so now I'm finding the ETFs with the most value exposure, but that also have lower exposure to energy. They don't have too big of a bet on energy.
Thank you for watching this overview on our ETF factor screener. If you have questions, you can email us at info@validea.com. Thanks again, and we hope to see you on Validea.